I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, hey everybody. I want to give a shout out this past weekend or past few days. I went to the Women in Tech Regatta. I was asked by them and another fellow podcaster to do some live interviews at the event at their welcome reception. It was really, really fun. So if you are a woman in tech, or if you want to support women in tech, or if you're interested in getting into the tech industry, check out the Women in Tech Regatta. They do a week-long conference in Seattle and a week-long conference in Vancouver. So I wanted to thank them for having me there. It was really, really fun. Now, today's show, today, when we think about business, we think about tech companies, we think about retail, we think about banks and things like that. And I think oftentimes we forget that the education system and the higher education system is a huge part of the business community, especially here in Seattle. So for that reason, I wanted to bring on Dr. Raymond Tymas-Jones, the president of Cornish College of the Arts. However, we found out this morning that he was not feeling well. So you know what they say, the show must go on. So shout out to executive assistant Felicia and all executive assistants, but especially Felicia. She worked so quickly and was so great to work with, and she found a replacement today, which is James Falzone, academic dean and professor of music at Cornish College of the Arts. Hi, James.
Hello.
Thank you for jumping in. Did you have, a couple hours to prepare?
When I woke up this morning, if I thought I'd be on a business podcast, it would be the farthest thing from my mind. But here I am. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so a little bit about James. He's a clarinetist, composer, and improviser whose work in the jazz and creative music scenes has won him international acclaim, a veteran contemporary music lecturer and clinician, as well as an award-winning composer. He's been at Cornish for 8 years. He was the chair of the music program and for about 6, and then he's the dean now for about 2 years. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Awesome. So before we get into the news, why are you so passionate about the arts and also, I guess, in line with that higher education?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been playing the clarinet since I was 10 years old. I had no particular proclivity towards music. I just sort of thought it'd be cool to play an instrument. My parents were very supportive, and I just fell in love with playing music, particularly with jazz and classical music. I mean, when I was 14 and all my friends were listening to whatever was popular when I was 14, I was listening to John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and, Stravinsky and things like that. So I've been passionate about playing music ever since and have had a rich life as a performing artist. And then right when I finished graduate school with my graduate degrees, I had a 9-month-old baby with my wife. Oh, wow. And I said, somebody better be bringing in some money. And you can't make a lot of money playing jazz and American culture. And so I started teaching part-time, and then that turned into full-time, and I've been teaching now steady for 22 years. Wow. I've never taken a semester off. And then the last 8 years have been now working in more higher ed administration, which I really like, which is just teaching from a different vantage point, really, in a lot of ways.
And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about Cornish in a minute, but just to give people a sense of the size if they're not familiar. First of all, we are here in South Lake Union. Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me. Yeah. And you said a little over 500 students last year?
That's correct. Yeah. Cornish has been up and down in its enrollment, as much as over 1,000 years ago. But really, I think we kind of thrive somewhere in the 600 to 800 realm. So we're a little lower, kind of building up after the pandemic. But awesome. We're an intentionally small school, so we can be having very meaningful interaction with students.
Yeah, I could tell that even when I walked in, I could see you talking to different students. Seems like you know everybody here. Right. Yeah. Cool. All right, well, let's dive into the stories. We've got 5 for you today. I'm going to list them off. First, Nanostring, a biotech company, is being bought. Then we've got non-compete clauses are now going to be banned. Cornish College of the Arts, wait, what? What's the story there? They put up Kerry Hall for sale, so I sort of planned that. We've got music venues opening/reopening, and we're going to kind of dive a little bit more into that. And then the president of Wizards of the Coast resigns, which is a gaming company. So you ready to get into it?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
All right, so Nanostring, there's a lot going on here. I fell down a Nanostring hole. The headline is that it's being bought, but there's so much more background to this. So a couple of years ago, this company called 10X Genomics sues Nanostring for patent infringement, saying basically you're using a product that we created. That takes a while in the legal system. And recently, I think like end of last year, the court settles and says, yes, Nanostring, you owe them $31 million in damages. which is quite a bit of money. And, I was kind of reading that oftentimes courts they end up having to do the damages instead of taking the treatment or device from the market because they don't want to take the product away from people, but they want to settle it, and typically ends up being in these damages. So Nanostring then is stuck with this $31 million in damages. During this trial and during the case, Europe blocks the sale of some of their products, which represented about 10% of the company's overall revenue. And then on top of that, you've got legal bills. So they aren't doing well. They can't afford this. They do a bunch of layoffs, but they're still struggling, which leads them to February where they file for bankruptcy. So essentially, they're citing that this patent infringement case kind of wiped out this company entirely. Now, what I also find interesting is that this company, 10x Genomics, they're suing 3 other biotech and biosciences companies. And that feels interesting and fishy to me. They also, Nanostring was founded in 2003. 10x Genomics was founded in 2012. So they're much later. Nanostring generated about $50 million in third quarter, and 10x Genomics generated about $150 million. So to me, they feel like a bully. I don't know. What did you gain from that article? Did you feel like they were kind of ganging up on Nanostring a little bit?
Again, as a kind of complete outsider, just reading that, it did feel that way
right?
to me too. Yeah, I can affirm.
I know. I wish I knew more about what the actual patent discussion was, but that even when I tried to look it up, it was all the science, because they basically make scientific devices. All I can really understand is microscopes, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know what the actual debate is. And then a tiny little piece of that story was that 10x Genomics acquired another company called ReadCore, and that company was what provided them with some of these patents that they're disputing. So I'm like, these aren't even your patents, bro, and you're the ones and you're suing 3 other people. But I assume it's not all the patents. So why I think this whole thing is interesting, part of it is the idea of patents in general. And can one person own an idea? Can one person own, in your realm, art comes up in my mind. I know, Ed Sheeran, I don't know if everybody knows the story, but he was sued for something about that. And I know a lot of stand-up comics say like, oh, they stole my joke. But people come up with ideas at the same time all the time. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I was just thinking, too, about for a while I was doing hot yoga, Bikram hot yoga. Mm-hmm. And, the guy who invented that, I don't know what his first name was, but Bikram, he patented the yoga moves that he came up with. And I remember somebody saying, you can't do that. That's a thousands-year-old tradition. You can't patent those. And there was a big hubbub a few years ago. So a lot of this particular article went a little over my head, I will confess.
It's a lot of science and legal jargon,
I appreciate that. But the 2 things that came to my mind were about what we do in education for who owns ideas of teaching. So if I design a really interesting class as a professor at Cornish, do I own that, or does the college own that?
Oh, yeah.
So can the college just teach that course again, even if I've moved on to a different job? There's a lot of debate about that, and there's some questions about that.
That's still up in the air. That's still gray.
It's still a little gray. I mean, the content that you develop while you are a professor here, or for any college for that matter, is kind of like the research you might be doing in a lab or something like that. So it's essentially owned by the college. That doesn't mean, though, that if I'm teaching music history here and I design a really cool music history class that's just got lots of great ideas and assignments and readings and a cool text that I found, maybe a paper that I wrote that the students are working through, if I then go teach at UW, I can teach that same course, but Cornish can also keep teaching that course that I designed. And I think that's what sometimes people miss, is that I'd be bringing all that content and Cornish can never teach that class I designed. Know that while you're teaching for them, they own that content and for the future, right? Yeah. That's something that's happened all the time in college settings. Unless you're making something that is so specific to your particular field and you have patented and so forth. Like if you're working at a major research university and you come up with some, something that is that can be trademarked in that way. But I also was thinking a lot about in the arts, we have maybe 2 ways of thinking about this. So I won't get too geeky music history here, but or just arts history. But in the history of the arts, you generally have, going back to like the Middle Ages, you have communal art making. Think of the gargoyles or the creation of Notre Dame Cathedral, right? Nobody really knows who put all those things in those places, right? It is a communal a way of making that cathedral. And so there might have been an artisan whose job was to make gargoyles at the top or some kind of little filigree at the top. And nobody knows who that was, right? But that was an essential, integral part of that building. Mm-hmm. Likewise, a lot of pieces of music from the Middle Ages right through the Renaissance, we really don't know who wrote them. And they were probably communal creations. And so the name that finally got put on the piece of music or the manuscript is just maybe the last scribe who wrote it down. But it is more than likely several people coming together and creating that music.
Yeah, and I think that patents, I struggle because is it really good for the industries if we're doing all these patents? Because are we advancing science if 10x Genomics is the only company that can make this device or work on it?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to me because my dad, he helps like innovate and invent windsurfing. And I don't know how to say that without sounding like the character from Mean Girls. It's like, my dad, the inventor of toaster strudel. My dad, the inventor of windsurfing. No, he helps kind of create what the footstraps look like, what the boom looks like, what the board looks like. And he didn't patent it, which, would have been nice to grow up rich. But but also like he's advancing windsurfing and people were learning from what he was doing. And so, I kind of think, do we need that patent for the motivation for the individual to get rewarded financially?
Yeah.
My dad was passionate about it, and I'm sure people were passionate about music and arts and science.
I think there's got to be some middle ground there. So your dad is making a particular thing, right? But the creation of cultural artifacts is a little bit different.
True.
And yet at the same time, so I'm also a recording artist. I make recordings of my own music. My name is on them. I have them registered with licensing companies. And then every year I get residual checks because my music has been performed on radio or in a concert hall or whatever that might be. It's not a lot of money, but it comes back to me, right? Yeah. But that only happens because I have said, I own this. Mm-hmm. So even though I have a part in my heart that really loves that kind of communal music making, I also make my livelihood in part because of my name on a specific thing. So I think it goes back and forth. A really interesting place to look at this is in the dance and theater worlds because choreographers, like the one genius choreographer who makes the work and everybody does with it, that's kind of gone away now. And a lot of choreographers are working in collaboration with the dancers. And so though their name might be on the piece as the choreographer, they're often saying like it's a collaborative work. And that feels, I think, like we're evolving into that in certain areas of the arts. I don't know how that translates exactly to the business world or to the tech world. Well, it kind of does
because, this lawsuit just pretty much wiped out a company that could be providing more resources. And so in your example, it'd be like, okay, there's only one choreographer now that can use those moves and we're not getting all the other choreographers.
Yeah, right. It's a good metaphor. I think that the more that we can have, to borrow the term like open source, that there's a good thing about open source. Mm-hmm. And if in the right place, in the right way, that can happen more in the tech and biofields and so forth, that's got to be a good thing, it seems to me.
I would think so. But if you're a patent expert, email us and let us know. But I think patents just get really gray. So I'm glad that Nanostring got bought. I think that's a good thing that they're going to stay in business. But they're going to be owned by a different company now and not locally. Okay, our next story is that the U.S. So this is a U.S. story. I try to keep everything relevant to Seattle, but this impacts everybody and we can't not talk about it. So in 4 months, unless it's blocked, but as of right now, in 4 months, the U.S. companies will no longer be able to bar employees from taking jobs with a competitor, often in the industry called as non-compete laws or non-compete clauses. So this actually affects roughly 1 in 5 workers. I did not realize it was that high. It used to be high-level execs, not letting them bounce from another company to another company or start their own company that's in competition. But now we're seeing it with a lot of lower-level people. So a couple caveats on this law that's eventually going to take place is that it doesn't apply to nonprofits. It'll impact existing and future non-competes except for senior executives with current ones. I didn't know this, but Washington, as well as some other states, but Washington in particular in 2019 banned them unless you were making more than $100,000 and capped it at a year and a half. So there was some regulation here in Washington and looks like some in other states, but nothing. This is just across the board. There can't be any. Let's see who's against this. The Chamber of Commerce is going to file a lawsuit to block the rule, saying the FTC is overstepping. I didn't see that was kind of the only counter. There was somebody else saying that like they can't make a sweeping rule for all the companies. But for the most part, this seems like a really good thing for workers. But there is a concern for employers, which is that, these people leaving might take their client list, they might take their business strategy, might take all this stuff to a competitor. So, we were just talking, you worked in higher education. Do you see non-competes in this realm?
Yeah, reading this article is quite fascinating to me because I had never heard of these before, which gives you a little bit of indication. I've been working in higher ed and the arts for my whole life. I don't see any evidence of this in higher ed. Now, it could be happening, and maybe it's happening, again, at some like research universities, but in the circles that I run, which are mostly liberal arts, nonprofit, liberal arts and art schools, I don't see any version of that. In fact, it's quite the opposite, where anybody is like, it's great when somebody leaves a certain institution and then goes and helps another institution. And we just brought in a new provost from Cal Arts, one of our main competitors. Cal Arts is an art school in LA, and he was the associate provost there. He's just come as our provost 3 weeks ago. I mean, it's great. He's bringing this wealth of knowledge about Cal Arts, not in a competitive way, but just like, oh yeah, we solved that problem this way, and so forth. So I don't see much evidence for it in higher ed. I appreciate what you just said. Like, it's good for workers. As my view in life is that things that are good for workers tend to be good things.
Yes.
I'm intrigued though. Maybe if I put a question back at you, like, why would it not apply to nonprofits? Any thoughts about that?
I don't know. That seems really interesting to me. I think that's a great question to dig into. I don't know why they would make that exception.
Which maybe is partly why it's not been a part of higher education, because most higher education higher education institutions are nonprofits, so that maybe is part of it as well.
Maybe, yeah. We were just, I was talking about how it's interesting that universities and higher education doesn't have it, but it does kind of make sense because the whole point is to create a better experience for the students.
Right.
The goal is the students, not necessarily. I mean, I know you as a college want to make more money, but I think it's interesting. I also think that I'm not a fan of them because, look, if I leave a company and I go to another company and the clients still want to work with me, then you don't really have a great product if they're following me and not staying with you. If you do have a good product, they are going to stay with you.
Think about it. Like, I mean, doctors do that all the time, right? Or psychologists. My wife is a massage therapist. I mean, if she leaves one organization, she would bring clients and so forth. It's interesting.
I'm curious to see how many new companies start too, because I forget that that's part of non-compete, is that you can't open up your own business that's similar to that.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I can think of, just out of interest, that just came to my mind, is that our faculty, while they're full-time here, cannot also be working at another institution. And that is about competition, because if you are the main professor here for sculpture, and you're also doing some adjunct teaching at Bellevue College for sculpture, well, why would a student want to come here to study with you when they can go to that school? So we do have that in our faculty laws that they can't do that. But it's the only thing I can think of that's a parallel to this idea in the corporate world.
Yeah. So overall, I think it's a good thing. I think employers, if you're worried about it, just do better.
Yeah, always. That's a great way to wake up.
It's
do
good
better.
For innovation. It's good for, treat your employer better so they don't leave, or have a better product. I don't know. I guess I'm a little biased on this one, but
I did notice that right at the end of it said Amazon had not responded, right? Which I thought was interesting, because I know they do not like it, right?
Right. And Microsoft came out publicly in support of it, and Amazon has not responded. I'm sure they'll come. If Microsoft is saying something, I'm sure they're behind it. But that is interesting for sure. Okay, our third story, the moment you've been waiting for.
Yes.
Cornish College of the Arts put up Kerry Hall for sale.
Wait, we did? Yeah, I had no idea. What?
So this came out, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think the 6th or 9th of April, something like that.
Okay, yeah. So typically the whole premise of my show is kind of hitting the top 5 news articles of the previous week. I made an exception this time because it was a big article, and I knew that was going to have either you or Raymond on. So I wanted to hear it from you first. So I will give a little background, but definitely jump in because you know this much better than I do. But Kerry Hall is located in Capitol Hill. And if you remember from the beginning of the episode, I was saying how we're in South Lake Union now. So you have multiple buildings in different parts of Seattle. It was built in 1921, and it was where the founder of the Arts College lived. So this college was founded by Nellie Cornish.
That's right.
In 1914, and she ran it for 25 years, and she lived in Kerry Hall, right?
She did. In fact, my former office was her bedroom. Not kidding. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
And so in the article, it was cited that the reason for selling Kerry Hall was to unify the South Lake Union campus and kind of have everything here in one spot. to give a sense of what we're talking about with Kerry Hall, it is a almost 32,000 square foot building. It includes classrooms, studios, rehearsal space, performance venue, and obviously offices for you. And something to note on this, it is listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. So that's what I learned. So my questions to you is, why sell it? Why now? And also, why no asking price? Those are kind of my three questions to start.
Yeah. Well, a great background there. It's all true. Cornish is a fascinating place. In Nellie, Cornish was a fascinating person, and her history and the reason why she founded the school was really engaging and intriguing, and caught up in the whole history of Seattle. I mean, she helped to found, in many ways, the Seattle Symphony. She kind of bailed them out at times, and they were integral in our founding as a institution. So a lot of Seattle history is caught up in Cornish in many ways. I'm not from Seattle. I'm a Chicagoan, and so when I came here in 2016, I learned all these things, and I realized quickly how important Cornish was. Cornish is also very important in the history of American arts. A lot of really important mid-century experimental artists either taught here or came out of here. People like John Cage, Mark Tobey, Merce Cunningham, Martha Graham. These are names that went on to change the arts, and they were all either on our faculty or associated with us in some way. That's because of Nellie Cornish bringing them here to do that work. So, and they all did their work in Kerry Hall. And so it's a special place because you are dancing on floors where Martha Graham danced, one of the greatest choreographers. You're a music student in a room where John Cage first experimented with certain kinds of electronic music. This, for geeks like us, this fills us with some pretty, some pretty cool feelings. In the early 2000s, Cornish, the Board of Trustees, bought this building where we're sitting right now. Mm-hmm. It is also, by the way, a historic landmark. We seem to only like to deal with those. I think the three main buildings we have are all registered. And they decided that this would be a great building to move all of the undergraduate education to, because we were just simply outgrowing that building and the whole. It wasn't just Kerry Hall, but we were using a lot of property in the Capitol Hill region. We also had property on what is now St. Mark's Cathedral. And there's a building there that we used for lots of things. So there was lots of property that we were outgrowing. They took over this building, started moving most of things down here. They couldn't quite finish moving music and dance because music and dance, they make noise and they take space.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't quite figure out how to get those two here. But we're talking I think that's 2003, 2004 when that happened. So this is going back a long time, right? So the idea of unifying the campus is a 20-plus-year-old endeavor.
Oh, okay. So some people are kind of thinking, this is so sudden, but
the idea of, again, there's two things going on. There's unifying the campus, there's selling Kerry Hall. Two different things. Okay. Unifying the campus has been going on a long time. We're just now, realizing we truly need to do that. So one of my commissions this year has been to work at getting music and dance here, finding space for those departments here. And we have worked those things out. Are they ideal? Do they replicate everything about Kerry Hall? Not quite, especially I think, but they're temporary. We think of that as a part of a larger master planning that we're doing, campus master planning. So then there's the issue of selling Kerry Hall, right? So I love that building. I think I would love it if we could keep that building. I think it'd be really special. But it is an expensive building that, sorry, Nellie, was not built terribly well.
Oh, yeah.
It is, because it's on the landmark registry, something happens. You can't just replace a window. You have to figure out exactly how to replace it according to the facade structures.
There's a lot of regulation around that.
A lot of regulation. It has a lot of needs. It's not seismically up to code, so it needs it. If you're going to do work in there, you have to do the earthquake stuff and so forth. So it's a problematic building. Yeah. It takes a lot of work and effort to keep it going. So I think these decisions don't happen at the dean level, as you can appreciate. That's why you wanted to have the president on. Okay. So I'm a consolation prize. But I can tell you that as I help in my work as dean and I see budgets and so forth, the building is it's not cost effective for us to really keep going. So the decision from the board to sell it. Now, I believe the board made that decision over a year ago.
Okay.
A few things happened. Again, I'm not quite sure I know all the details, but it happened where suddenly we decided to announce it. And that happened maybe a little faster than the community of educators here was ready for. That caught us a little by surprise. We didn't quite communicate to the students. That's why we have a sit-in protest on Monday.
I was just saying, another article that came out was that students were doing a sit-in because they're concerned about who the new person is that's going to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm right there with them. I actually am going to go and sit with them, support them. Especially right now with what we're seeing around campuses. There's no way I'm leaving my students without, somebody there to help them.
Yeah. So, do you have control over who comes in as a college?
I think we do to an extent. I mean, it's a board of trustees matter, but our board is made up of people who love the arts and who love the school. So
you don't think like a tobacco company is going to come in?
Well, I mean, again, I'm
just trying to think like what would be the worst.
I don't have all the sense of it, and I certainly see a lot of, I'll be frank, a lot of ugly building around Seattle that doesn't make a lot of sense to me as somebody who comes from Chicago, where architecture was like really prized, and you kept a lot of old architecture around. So, but I think that there's a very interestingly, there's a lot of groundswell of alums, of people in the arts from around the Seattle community who want to see that building remain in the arts. Yeah. The reason being is because it holds two very special things that are in rare commodity in Seattle, and I hope that business leaders will listen to this. Performing venue, right? Mm-hmm. Poncho Hall is a very good 200-seat chamber/small ensemble kind of performing venue. There are not many of those left in the city. So It's fine if you want to go play Key Arena and you're Taylor Swift or whatever, but if you want to, if you just, are a small chamber ensemble and can maybe fill 100 people, there aren't that many places to do that. That's a good thing for the economy. It's a good thing for businesses to have, 100 people come to a small hall and go to local restaurants and go get coffees and go attend this concert. So it has that, and then it also has 3 gorgeous dance spaces. Those are also not easy to find in Seattle. Yeah. So this is where dance companies would come in and they would rent the space from us for their own rehearsals, things like that. Yeah. So if we lose those to a developer, that's not a good thing for Seattle. It's just plain and simple for the Seattle arts community.
No, I agree.
So we're trying to see what we can do. I know that the president is committed to hearing from anybody who wants to have conversations. Your question about why is there no asking price? As far as I know, it's because we're open to all kinds of opportunities and offers and so forth. So putting an asking price on there either scares somebody away or makes people wonder why that asking price is there. But there's lots of conversations happening. I know the building is being seen by some really interesting people right now. So we'll just have to see what happens. But the students and the alums and the local community, again, I share the sentiment. It would be great to see that building continue to serve the arts. Maybe it's a multi-use building, right? So I perform often in the Good Shepherd Center up in Wallingford, which has a great performance venue in it. But people actually live in that building, and there's a performance venue and a bunch of offices and psychology, offices and a small little school, and it seems to serve a whole lot of purposes. I wonder if Kerry Hall could, continue to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate the insight there. Mm-hmm. And you kind of mentioned about music venues, so I'm going to move on to our next story. I sort of cheated and I put 2 stories into one, but it's basically about music venues in Seattle, and what better person to talk to than you. So the 2 different stories, one is about a venue in Carnation, Washington, and one is about Connor Byrne, which is in Ballard. So I'll start with the Carnation story. I hadn't heard this, which is interesting because I feel like I'm kind of in the music scene a little bit, but Seattle's biggest new music venue is slated to open next month, so May 24th, and it's in Carnation, and it's called Remlinger Farms. It's in partnership with STG. So STG is Seattle Theater Group. So when you think of Paramount Theater, Moore Theater, and the Neptune. So STG and Remlinger Farms are partnering together for the 6,000-person amphitheater. It does already exist in the sense that there's an amusement park there, there's a brewery there, they host events already, but nothing quite like this endeavor that they're trying to open up, kind of expand it a bit more into this amphitheater. It's permitted to do 34 shows a year. There's already a dozen on sale right now, and they're going to be hosting a 3-day festival called the Thing Festival. The article, though, cites that there's some locals urging to pump the brakes on this because they're citing that there's going to be a lot of traffic. It's a rural 2-lane road. Can it handle it? There's going to be a lot more noise. And, when they say we've been doing events before, these other events were like day-long festivals versus concerts are much more scheduled. So everyone will arrive at the same time and leave at the same time. Yeah. So there was also some stuff in this article about how there's some permitting process loopholes that allowed them to get this approved before they were able to hear from the community. And I think that was maybe the biggest miss, is that I think the community just wanted to be heard and have a discussion about that before kind of announcing this. And I also think it's great to have more music venues. Do you have thoughts on this article before I recap the Connor Byrne one?
Yeah, I guess I was kind of caught in the middle. I felt for everybody. So I know people at STG, I think really highly of them. They're really big thinkers about presenting the arts. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. And it's great to see a new music venue like that. But you got to feel for the local people who are suddenly going to have a lot of people driving through the town. Yep. My hope is that, it becomes a boon for them, that the people coming through are attending, going to restaurants and buying coffees and shopping and all that kind of stuff, whatever needs to happen. So I guess I can see both those things. It does remind me a lot of a music venue in Chicago called Ravinia, which is it's a little different, but similarly, it's an outdoor music venue in a very affluent area of Chicago. And I think there's always been a lot of complaints from the local people. But then when you get people coming in and doing all the commerce that comes with it, suddenly it's like, okay, well, maybe it's not so bad, right? So I just think the folks at STG, as far as I know, are really ethical, thoughtful people. I think they'll probably figure out a way to make this, work for the community. That's what people have to do, is just be kind to one another and understand where each other's coming from.
Make concessions and compromise. No, I agree. So the second article in line with music venues is Connor Byrne in Ballard. So after 125 years, they were falling on tough times, and they actually ended up closing at the end of March last month. But then some employees got together and they came up with what's called Connor Byrne Collective, which is a community-owned music venue. So they were asking for about $40,000, and when this article came out, they'd already raised over $50,000. And online, you could become a lifelong member for $300. So basically, anybody in the community, any musicians, they can all be kind of co-owning this collective. So their plan is to possibly open as early as this spring. That feels like right now. I think they're planning to reopen it as soon as they can.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
So I guess your thoughts on I know a lot of your students graduate here, and do you feel like there's enough music venues for people? What are your thoughts?
Of all the articles, this is the one that I was like, yeah, all right, I love this, because I've actually been part of these kinds of coalitions that have helped to save venues, or I was part of a coalition that helped to kind of put together a new music and dance venue in Chicago. So this is the kind of thing I love to see, these sort of grassroots people coming together and kind of getting behind a project like this. This is awesome. I hope they're very successful. And just going back to the earlier thing about Kerry Hall, that's kind of what I'm hearing some people trying to do even for Kerry Hall.
Interesting.
Get a lot of people together, kind of share the burden of what it would mean to save this building and so forth. To your question, as a performing artist in Seattle, I perform all over, but I spend a lot of time playing in Seattle. There are a lot of venues, but there just simply could be more for more up-and-coming kinds of groups. That's why I think this one mentions how Connor Byrne was a space where you could try out material and and so forth. There's a lot of bars and a lot of places to play music in town, but there's not a lot of place to do more creative things. And I think that's something that if you asked about my students from Cornish, they are missing that, right? So it's kind of hard to go get a gig at the Sunset, right? Or the Tractor Tavern or whatever. But there's got to be these coffee houses where they can kind of stop in and be like, okay, you don't have to pay me. I just want to put my hat out and play my songs and see how people react, right? That's how, Tracy Chapman started and so many great artists. That's what my students are looking for. And that is kind of missing around town right now. There are a couple of good venues. I'm thinking of the Royal Room down in Columbia City, which has a kind of motto of allowing people to try material out. So there needs to be more of it. Yeah. Seeing people rally around this venue really warms my heart. And I think the business world needs to remember how little money it takes to help these organizations thrive.
That's such a good point, because $40,000-$50,000 in some of my companies, people pay that to sponsor one event.
Yeah, right. And that could just turn around a venue that's just trying to get through a couple of weeks. There was this phrase that I quoted, I think it's from that article, where it's about creating the kind of world we want to live in. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Right. What a great quote. I think it's from the people who saved Connor Byrne. I think that's what I would want to say to a lot of business people, in the world as well, is what kind of world do you want to step into? Like, we can't all be home watching Netflix all the time after work. Like, you want to go out to a club and hear live music. You want to go to the symphony, the opera, to see dance, to go to theater. This city's got so many things happening, but a lot of these arts organizations are struggling, like holding on by threads. A little bit of help from the corporate world goes a long, long way.
Yeah, I agree. We did an article last week about Bumbershoot opening up that new arts venue. So
love that. Yeah.
I love to see the partnership between the corporate world and the arts world, and I hope that continues. We're getting short on time here, so I'm going to move to our last article, and then I'll let you enjoy your sunny Friday afternoon. So the last one is Wizards of the Coast president is resigning. So Wizards of the Coast is owned by Hasbro, and Wizards of the Coast is based in Renton, so it's here in the Seattle area, and they're owned by Hasbro. They have been owned by Hasbro since 1999. You might recognize them because they're responsible for Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. So Cynthia Williams is the president. She joined Hasbro in 2022 to replace the former president who moved into the CEO position. And before that, prior to that, she was with Microsoft under the kind of the Xbox. So she's always kind of been in gaming. Why this article is a little interesting is that there was no reason provided as to why the week and a half-ish notice for resignation, which is uncommon for somebody in that position of a president level. And they don't have a successor lined up, which makes me feel like they were definitely not prepared for this resignation. So I would like to know what the tea is and what the drama is, but I don't know. So what we're going to talk about, I wanted to bring this article in because we can talk about the gaming industry. So it's estimated to be, I found a couple different numbers online, but one of them said $350 billion industry globally in 2022, and then about $100 billion in the US. It is a massive industry.
Yeah, right.
So I guess my question to you is, when I was thinking about gaming and thinking about the arts, we think about like the show The Last of Us. Did you watch that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge popular show that started as a video game, and video games these days are really big into storytelling. You're essentially watching a movie / playing it, and then they turn it into the show. So what are your thoughts on the intersection of gaming and the arts and film and design and kind of what your school teaches here?
Yeah, great questions. I just, full disclosure, like the last video game I played was like Atari Asteroids, like it's just never been a thing I've been really into. But I have children, teenage children, and they play lots of games, although they're not super into it, but my son was a big Magic the Gathering player. So to your question, is every student who walks through here in every different art form, games is on their mind.
Really?
So music students, they often come in and they say, yeah, I play violin or I play guitar, but what I really want to do is write music for games.
Oh, interesting.
Or the design students come in and they say, yeah, here's my portfolio and I do posters and I do this, but what I really want to do is design games, right? We have a voiceover class here that's really for actors, but what they really want to do is be voiceover for games,
Whoa.
right? So it feels like every student comes in because they've grown up with this.
Yeah.
This has been their life for the last 10 years or whatever. So, and they know these games. I was at a music concert the other night for a student who was doing their senior recital, and they had arranged a bunch of video game music as part of the recital. I didn't know the music, so I thought, well, this is a cool song. And then I realized that everybody was like singing along and it was some kind of video game. So here at Cornish, we have lots of intersections. So we have a game art major, and that is actually how to design games, and especially about like experimental thinking about game design, because a lot of really cool thinking is going into games. I mean, you're looking at the intersection, talk about interdisciplinarity, right? I mean, Nellie Cornish founded this school because she liked the intersection between music, dance, and theater. And so the school's always been about interdisciplinarity. Games are fully interdisciplinary. You're looking at storytelling, you're looking at acting, you've got music, you've got sound design, you've got obviously
education often too. There's some educational video games, yeah.
All those things, right? It's coming in all kinds of different ways. So every student here that I've encountered, it's kind of part of their language. Our game art major is actually showing students how to create. So, and they might be about the storytelling, they might get our theater students to do the voiceovers, they get music students to do the music, they might bring in an art student to help with colors or something like that. So it's probably the second or third fastest growing majors that we have here right now.
I mean, that checks out with some of the numbers I was saying with the industry. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. The other big one for us is animation, which is connected directly towards gaming. So those two are under the same kind of division for us. Yeah, it's something that we're trying to understand. That when I talked about Cornish being an experimental school back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, it is that now, but it's just in a whole different realm. It's in animation, game art, video design, things of that nature. So it's exciting. For me personally, like I don't always track with it, but I see the creativity in there. I see what's happening as being truly artistic expression, just in a different realm than how I was trained.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish we had time to dive into AI and video games and art, but that is a whole different podcast.
Yes.
So I think that's enough to recap the news for everybody so you feel in the know about what's going on. I wanted to give you a chance. Is there anything you want to plug to the audience? I know we had a few asked throughout the episode, but is there anything else you want to let people know?
Just just plug in Cornish. Come see what we do. Come to shows. There's beautiful exhibits. There's great music. There's great theater and dance and so forth. We're here. We've been here for a long time, and we're not going anywhere. So come see us.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for jumping in last minute and replacing. This was a really fun episode, and thank you for hosting me here.
My pleasure. Yeah. Sorry I couldn't be the president.
It's okay. This has been The Weekly. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at theweeklyseattle@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.